I was standing in line at the DMV that Tuesday afternoon, flipping through emails on my phone, trying to ignore the flickering fluorescent lights above me. The place was packed, parents with crying toddlers, impatient teenagers, and bored adults like me all trapped in that miserable waiting game. Then it happened. A woman, maybe in her late 30s, well-dressed in a navy pantsuit with a silver badge-shaped brooch on her blazer, calmly stepped to the counter. She didn't cut the line, she walked up with purpose, holding a stack of official documents. But the officer standing near the entrance, tall, stern-looking, with mirrored sunglasses pushed up on his head, didn't like that. "Hey! Back of the line," he barked, loud enough for everyone to hear. The woman turned, puzzled but polite. "I'm not here for a license. I have an appointment with the deputy registrar." "Yeah, and I'm Santa Claus," the officer muttered. "Let's see some ID." She calmly handed it over. His eyes scanned the card, then squinted. He looked her up and down and scoffed. "This ain't valid. You're coming with me." "What?" she asked, voice still controlled. "That ID is federal. I'm authorized to." He didn't let her finish. In front of everyone, he pulled her hands behind her back and slapped on cuffs. Gasps echoed across the room. A woman behind me whispered, "She didn't do anything. She's with the government or something," a man near the wall added. The officer ignored it all, dragging her toward the side hallway. "Sir," she said, "you're making a serious mistake." He laughed. "The only mistake here was you thinking you could skip protocol." That's when someone else entered the building. A man in a sharp suit, with a briefcase and an expression that could cut glass, walked straight toward the officer. And the entire room went quiet. The man in the suit moved like someone who wasn't used to being questioned. Mid-40s, salt and pepper hair, crisp tie, polished shoes that clicked against the tile floor with precision. He didn't look at the officer first, he looked at the woman in cuffs. "Agent Monroe?" he said. She lifted her head, jaw clenched. "Yes, sir." His eyes snapped to the officer. "Uncuff her. Now." The officer blinked, confused. "Who the hell are you?" The man calmly reached into his inner jacket pocket, pulled out a black leather wallet, and flipped it open. A federal emblem glinted inside. Special Inspector Daniel Reeves. Office of Internal Affairs. Silence hit the room like a slap. Someone near the back audibly whispered, "Wait. Internal Affairs?" The officer's posture changed instantly, his hands going from aggressive to uncertain. I didn't know she was," Reeves cut him off with a raised hand. "That's the problem. You didn't ask. You saw someone who didn't fit your expectations and made a snap judgment." "I thought she was." "You thought wrong," Reeves said, stepping closer. "Agent Monroe was sent here to conduct an audit. She had clearance to bypass public lines and direct authorization from the Registrar General. Instead, you arrested her in public. Illegally." The officer's face flushed. "It was a mistake." Reeves didn't flinch. Mistakes like this get people fired. Everyone in the room froze, watching, unmoving. Reeves turned to Monroe. "Agent, are you injured?" "No, sir. Just humiliated." Reeves nodded, then looked at the stunned clerk behind the counter. "Clear this room. Now. Everyone out." No one dared argue. As we filed out, the tension was so heavy you could feel it in your chest. The officer stood frozen, hand hovering over the handcuffs still on Monroe's wrists. And just as I stepped through the doorway, I heard Monroe say, voice steady and low, "You just cuffed the wrong woman in front of the entire state database team." I lingered just outside the glass doors, along with a small crowd of others who clearly wanted to see how this was going to end. Inside, the blinds were being hastily drawn shut, but not before we caught one last glimpse of the officer finally removing the cuffs from Agent Monroe's wrists, hands trembling. 10 minutes later, the doors opened again. Agent Monroe walked out first. Her posture was tall, her steps precise. Not a wrinkle on her blazer, not a hint of fear in her expression. Behind her came Inspector Reeves, holding a sealed manila folder and a clipboard tucked under one arm. The officer? He stayed inside, out of view. The parking lot was dead quiet. Reeves raised his voice just enough for the crowd to hear. To everyone who witnessed what happened today, thank you for remaining calm. A formal statement will be issued by the end of the day. Monroe glanced around at the people watching her. She wasn't angry. She wasn't shaken. She looked like someone who had been through worse and wasn't about to let this define her. One woman in the crowd, an elderly lady with a walking cane, stepped forward and said softly, "We knew he was wrong. We saw it." Monroe gave a faint nod. "I appreciate that." Just as they turned to leave, a second black SUV pulled up and parked near the building. Two men in suits exited quickly and walked inside, passing the crowd without a word. I leaned toward a guy next to me and whispered, "What now?" He replied, "Internal Affairs doesn't send two teams unless someone's in serious trouble." Minutes later, someone came outside with a box full of personal items, a desk nameplate, a radio, and a folded-up American flag. That's when we realized, the officer wasn't just in trouble. He'd already been terminated. The sight of that box being carried out said more than words ever could. The crowd outside grew silent again, not from fear, but from awe. You could feel the shift in power, like watching a storm finally break after hours of pressure in the air. Inside the building, the two new agents from the SUV had moved fast. Rumors swirled among the DMV staff near the door. The officer's login had been revoked, his badge deactivated on the spot, and every file he accessed that morning was being reviewed. Agent Monroe remained by the entrance for a few moments, checking something on her phone. She looked composed, but there was something deeper in her stillness, the quiet control of someone who'd had to prove herself one too many times. Then, one of the employees, the same clerk who had watched everything unfold at the counter, came outside. She looked nervous. "Agent Monroe?" Monroe turned. "I just wanted to say. I'm sorry I didn't speak up. I should have done something. We all should have." Monroe studied her for a second, then replied, "Thank you. It takes strength to admit that." Reeves stepped in beside her. "There'll be training reforms, and full debriefs. No more looking the other way." At that moment, another civilian stepped forward, a younger man who'd been filming everything on his phone. He raised the device and asked, "Should I post this? Or give it to you?" Monroe took a deep breath. "Send it to Internal Affairs. We'll handle it. No need to go viral, this needs to go official." The man nodded and handed it over. Just then, a news van pulled into the far end of the parking lot. Reeves glanced at Monroe. "You ready?" She didn't hesitate. "Let them try to spin it," she said. "This time, we're the ones with the truth on tape." As the news crew unloaded their cameras, a small circle formed around Agent Monroe and Inspector Reeves. The anchor, a polished man in a navy suit and perfect hair, tried to push through with a microphone in hand, already talking into the camera. "We're live outside a state facility where sources tell us a high-ranking federal agent was mistakenly detained by local security." Reeves stepped in, his voice calm but commanding. "This will not be a media circus. Agent Monroe will make a statement. That's all." The anchor paused. "May I ask who made the mistake?" Monroe looked directly at the camera. "The officer who arrested me chose judgment over protocol. That decision cost him his badge." The cameraman focused tighter on her face, and everyone watching, whether they're in person or through a TV screen, saw it: no anger. No vengeance. Just truth. "I wasn't harmed," she continued, "but that's not the point. This happens to people every day, people without badges, people without backup. I just had the resources to fight it from the inside." There was a long pause. Even the anchor lowered his mic slightly. A second camera zoomed out to show the crowd watching from behind, all of us completely still. Then Monroe said something that froze the air around her. Some mistakes cost trust. Others cost careers. But the most dangerous are the ones nobody talks about. Today, we're talking about it. With that, she turned, walked to the SUV, and opened the door. Just before getting in, she looked back at the building one last time, not with bitterness, but with quiet authority. Then she was gone. And for a long moment, no one said a word. Because what happened next didn't need words. It left the room, and all of us, silent. By evening, the footage had made its way up the chain. Though it wasn't posted online as the agent requested, it was already circulating internally, through federal inboxes, legal departments, and government phones marked urgent. Agent Monroe didn't go home. She went straight to a closed-door meeting inside a secure federal building downtown. Reeves was already there, surrounded by analysts and legal advisors reviewing the officer's record on a digital screen. "He's got 2 prior complaints," said one analyst. Nothing stuck. But both were over unnecessary detainment. Monroe crossed her arms. "It stuck today." Another agent leaned forward. "Do we press charges for unlawful restraint?" Reeves looked at Monroe. "That's your call." She hesitated, not from doubt, but calculation. "No. Not yet. What I want is a hearing. In uniform. Let him explain what happened today in front of people who know the law." There was a murmur of agreement. Monroe added, "And I want the training protocol rewritten. Line by line." Someone in the room raised an eyebrow. "You think they'll agree?" "They'll have no choice," Reeves said. "She's not just a field agent anymore after today. She's the face of accountability." Meanwhile, back at the DMV, changes had already begun. The clerk who apologized earlier was the first to sign a written statement supporting Monroe's account. So did 3 others. The man who filmed it. He'd been contacted by 2 legal representatives already, not to bury it, but to certify it as official evidence. By midnight, a draft report was on the director's desk. And in the final paragraph, one sentence stood out, bold and centered: "Failure to intervene today would have meant endorsing silence." 3 days later, the hearing was set. It wasn't a criminal trial, not yet. This was an internal disciplinary review. But the room it took place in felt more like a courtroom than a meeting space. A long mahogany table ran down the center, lined with legal advisors, senior officers, and oversight officials. At the far end sat the man who'd made the arrest, Officer Raymond Kessler. He no longer wore his uniform. Just a dress shirt and a clipped tone of forced humility. But the way he glanced around the room told a different story, one of discomfort, and a hint of panic beneath his skin. Agent Monroe walked in just as the room quieted. She wore her standard field blazer, no frills, no medals. Only her credentials clipped visibly to her chest. She didn't sit immediately. Instead, she stood near the podium as the moderator announced, "Review hearing of Officer Raymond Kessler, held under Section 41G, misuse of detainment authority." The moderator looked to Monroe. "You may proceed." She spoke without notes. "I'm not here to shame. I'm here to correct. Because what happened to me doesn't begin or end with one man, it starts with a culture of assumption. Of unchecked power. Of believing authority means being right." She turned to Kessler, who avoided her eyes. "You didn't know who I was. That shouldn't matter. You didn't ask. That does matter." Someone cleared their throat in the back, nervously. Monroe went on, steady. "You thought dragging me away proved your control. All it did was prove your disregard for procedure. For people. For accountability." Kessler finally looked up. "I thought you were being aggressive. That you were cutting the line. And what part of speaking calmly with paperwork in hand looked aggressive, she asked. Be honest. Kessler didn't answer. The room held its breath. Then one of the panel members, a retired commander, leaned forward and said coldly, she outranks you. She outranked you that day. She still does. Kessler's eyes dropped to the table. No one needed to speak after that. Because in that moment, the silence was louder than any defense he could have offered. The panel took only 17 minutes to deliberate. When they returned, the room was still. No murmurs, no shuffling papers, just a collective awareness that what was coming would set a tone not just for one officer, but for the system itself. The lead panelist, an older woman with sharp glasses and a history in civil rights enforcement, stood to deliver the verdict. Officer Raymond Kessler, after review of the evidence, witness statements, and your failure to follow basic protocol, this panel has reached a unanimous decision. Kessler sat stiffly, jaw clenched. You are hereby stripped of your commission and barred from applying for law enforcement roles under any federal or state jurisdiction. Effective immediately. A single gasp came from the back. Kessler's attorney put a hand on his shoulder, but he didn't move. Monroe didn't gloat. She didn't blink. She simply nodded once and gathered her things. But as she turned to leave, the panel chair added, Agent Monroe. She paused. The chair continued, you handled this with exceptional restraint. It did not go unnoticed. A recommendation is being submitted for your advancement to senior compliance oversight, national level. Monroe raised her eyes slowly. Understood. The doors opened as she stepped out, greeted by a hallway lined with people, other agents, legal staff, even civilians, waiting, watching. No applause. Just respect. As she passed, one of the junior officers whispered under his breath, that's what real authority looks like. Outside, the day was cloudy and cool. She walked alone toward a waiting black SUV. Reeves stood by the door. He didn't ask how it went. He just opened it and said, DC just called. They want you next week. She climbed in without hesitation. Because after everything that happened in that small room, she wasn't just proving a point anymore. She was setting a new standard. By the time Monroe landed in DC the following week, her name was already circulating through departments that rarely paid attention to internal affairs. Quietly but consistently, she had become a symbol, not of resistance, but of reform that didn't shout, but showed. She was sworn into her new position with little ceremony, just a private meeting in a secured federal office, a formal signature, and a new ID badge stamped with Senior Oversight Director. Her job, review national enforcement policy. Restructure training. Rebuild trust where others had shattered it. Back in her hotel that night, she stood by the window overlooking the Capitol dome. The lights below blinked like a heartbeat. She thought about that day in the DMV, the click of cuffs, the silence in the crowd, the look on Kessler's face when everything turned. She hadn't chased justice for herself. She chased it because too many people couldn't. And now? Now she had the authority to make sure this didn't happen again. Not because people were afraid to make mistakes, but because the system would no longer let them hide behind them. Her phone buzzed. A message from Reeves, they'll forget the name of the officer. But they'll remember yours. Keep going. She typed 2 words in response. I will. Then she powered off the phone, closed the blinds, and let the silence settle. Because in the end, it wasn't about who shouted the loudest. It was about who changed what came after the silence.